Okay. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to our show. Hi, Juraj.
Right?
Yeah, good. 2025. Whoever thought we'd get this far? It's quite exciting, especially as it's going to be a year of more AI, which I think we're going to talk about today, right?
Yeah. I'm really looking
Definitely.
forward to that. So maybe let's start with the very first item on our list, and that's who is that Jonathan? Who is the guy? Could you maybe tell us something more?
I did ask ChatGPT this question the other day, and it gave me a bit of a rogue answer. But
Mhm.
for everyone who wants to know the more legitimate one, of course, I've been in the automation space for 25 years. So Joe Colantonio refers to me as the automation cyborg, sent back from the future to save the world from bad software. I've kind of pivoted away from pure automation to kind of, I guess, AI in the last 6 years. So I was based out in Silicon Valley building a very well-known test automation tool that did model-based testing, and started introducing some of the what I class as classic ML to the product. And then, of course, more recently, the last 4 years, I've been heading the R&D capability for a large organization, building and focusing more on large language models, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of where my team's been building out solutions. And then more recently, probably the last 6, 9 months, has been around the agentic AI landscape. And,
Mhm.
we'll probably talk about that later on, but I think really the fundamentals are what great capabilities like your product can you quickly create useful and valuable automation. And I think this is where we're seeing the shift. I'm hoping 2025 is the year where we're going to see your product and a number of others on the market, which people can actually start using in
Mhm.
anger and start taking advantage of not just code generation tools, but ones that help with requirements generation, test, design,
Mhm.
really all those activities that you're doing as a day to day tester or developer, creating Cucumber, Gherkin scripts, all this other good stuff. So yeah, quite exciting landscape. It's good to see how it's changed over the last 4 decades.
So you said you are in the software testing for 25 years, right?
Really?
That's a bit crazy number.
It is, yeah. And I started in the 90s, and my first job was an automation engineer. So
I see.
it's quite interesting. I was working for a telco company, and they were using PABXs, so being able to early days of voice over IP, but it was all hardware that was used for automation. It wasn't just
Uh-huh.
software, right? Um, and then obviously as software came along and set software test automation, I kind of got completely hooked.
Uh-huh.
And then back in the 90s, I kind of reached out to Dorothy Graham,
Mhm.
and she kind of started picking up and helping and support me, mentoring me. And I was lucky because we both did a keynote this year, and she did 50 years in test automation, and I was going to do 25 years in automation and try and But then I thought, it's just too half the experience that she's got. Actually, I'm just going to say, what's the future for test automation?
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's interesting because people like Dorothy started in 1970s with Bell Labs. They were doing classic test automation. She was the
Yeah.
first person to write a test automation framework. And I think there's been lessons learned over that time that are still really valuable today. And I think this is the interesting thing is, we evolved the technology, but there's certain things that we kind of lose in translation over those many years because and we repeat the same mistakes, right?
I see. Yeah.
Ooh, but
All right.
I'm a little bit
So,
surprised because people are still saying that testing is a pretty young domain, and you are saying 25 years. So come on, that's crazy.
yeah, I would have one question about this because 25 years, I can't imagine. Actually, I'm there 20 years anyhow. So, but how you keep yourself motivated or passionate about the topics, that would be one. And then maybe something similar which pops up when you was talking about the conference. I saw your opening of the keynote. You dance out on the stage. And I also noticed that you are doing a lot of crazy videos to promote the testing and content and everything. So I was a bit surprised that even after 25 years, you are still looking excited about the topic. So how you maintain that?
It's a great question. I could quite defer to my last Instagram post where I promoted an event whilst smashing a guitar on Instagram, TikTok, all those kind of things. And it's a new wave, right? This idea of 2 minute shorts where you've got to engage somebody by jumping off into an ice lake, which I've done last year. Jumping off a boat. All these kind of crazy social media stunts just to promote something. And we kind of kept the momentum going between us as in the conferences. So Tariq set the bar, I think, not last year, the year before, by doing an AI generated rap song and then getting everyone to hold their iPhones up with the light on and get everyone on a keynote literally rapping with him. And we were like, the bar's been set pretty high. So me and Tariq have been going after each other for the last year, should we say. We finally gave up at the Portland event. We said, okay, that's it. No more showmanship. Let's take, slideware out. Let's get rid of any of these dancing things. So I did a dancing on stage in India with like 25,000 views, went viral within the first, 12 hours. And, it was just purely for entertainment value. And I think you've got to get onto this in 2025. It is shock value. It's there's a lot of LinkedIn where there's people posting more Facebook based content than actual the correct content for that platform. And I know the Jameses and the Michael have commented like, why is there a naked person on my screen jumping into an ice lake? And I'm like, well, I'm just promoting tomorrow's conference, right? But I think it can be seen in two different ways. I think you've got to keep that enthusiasm going, right? And you've got 20 years in automation, right? You'd kind of say, the same conversations start coming up. Sometimes adding a little bit of controversy into there, adding things in that get people talking and get the conversation start. And that's really what we're trying to do, is rope in the next generation to start putting out their ideas, right? And then supporting the new talent that's coming through that is going to replace us. And then, probably 25 years from now, I'll be doing the same thing Dot did and going, okay, well, this is what I did with my 50 years in testing. Hand it over to the young ones to do the next one, right? The Padawan learners, shall we say.
I see, nice. So I didn't know that it's competition with Tariq, because I didn't notice that he is publishing something similar, so maybe I will do
I'm surprised as well.
next time better job to research these things. So anyhow, apart from these testing topics, do you have any other hobbies apart from Star Wars, or if it's hobby?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely turned into a collection. I think part of having a legitimate backdrop in Zoom is to start collecting stuff. To make it interesting. So when you're talking, people can maybe nod off and look at other things that you're doing. But yeah, I think it's great to have kind of other things. To be honest, I've just ordered a whole stack of social media cameras and stuff for the new year to do some more organic content to hopefully get my YouTube channel up. And I've been doing quite a lot in the XR space in a few years back in the metaverse when that was a big buzzword. And obviously CES has just dropped a couple of weeks back in Vegas, and there's a lot of interest in this XR, which is you're going to see these Google glasses maybe next year or the year after, but you've got these new generation, which are Android powered devices that do spatial computing. So I've started recording, some interesting content in spatial environments, which is like LiDAR. So if you think of that scene from Minority Report, where he's talking, he's got his, the interactive kind of historical videos, it's interesting to see how these technologies come, but also, people you know, it's like anything. You know, I'm sure you've all used a VR headset, felt quite sick, time to vomit. How long till you know, you're like, that's it. I've had enough VR for today. You
That
know,
would be my question. Is it still alive as a topic? Because I felt like this was a big buzz 2 years, 3 years ago, and then at
Metaverse
least
everywhere, yeah.
from my social bubble, it somehow disappeared. I didn't see it for a long time, or I didn't see it some big wave.
Mm.
I heard that maybe industrial application might be still alive, but in a daily normal life, I knew and saw the Apple. What was the name? They
Reality Pro. Yeah. So we
yeah.
worked on that for Tim, right? So Tim actually came out to us and asked us to do some of the testing for what they called their LiDAR system, which was really quite advanced. And you know, so we were doing a lot of that kind of work. But you're right. It was originally it was an enterprise use cases. So we're working with Ruben, who was the guy who ran the HoloLens division, and as you probably noticed, a lot of it went to military. So a lot of these became ITAR regulated devices, which meant that they couldn't be consumer devices. So even though they were building them, they could only be used for enterprise. So that's when you saw the Reality Pro, which wasn't a great device because you had to carry a battery pack with it. But the true depth technology, which is the spatial computing component, was quite revolutionary. And so this year they're releasing a cheaper version of that, but I don't think anyone's really going to adopt it. But Android have kind of nailed it with this glaze. So it tracks your eyes, and then you look at, as you glaze over it, it just overlays the information on a standard pair of glasses. So I think technology is going that way. But I think you're right, is that, you know, Zuckerberg was pushing the meta landscape, right?
Yeah.
And then he just pivoted to Llama. And,
Yeah,
you know,
there
it's
is
a bit
no
like,
Llama.
exactly. And so the money just went, well, it didn't just go. They're still spending billions, but it all went into R&D. And same with Elon, right? Is it went into creating better versions and maybe less successful and less popular versions of variants of large language models because they wanted to get in the game. And in a way, they wanted to catch up OpenAI, right? And, you know, I remember a call Jason was on with, you know, with Sam from OpenAI. And again, same thing, you know, where are they going? They're going in the, you know, they're hiring all the Selenium and automation engineers in the Valley because they're working on large action models, right? They want to take the next step. They don't want, you know, text to text. They want text to action. And they want to be able to say, do the actual actions in front of you. So things like Copilot, you know, my laptop here's got an NPU in it. The idea is you say to it, oh, you know, drive my SAP, and it drives SAP. It knows your schema. It goes through it, sets up a new order ID in front of your eyes. Now, for us automation people, we're sat there going, well, this is really easy, right? We've done this 20 years ago. But the real trick is to get it so, which is where things like XLAM that dropped the back end of last year from Salesforce, is it wants to be able to support not just browsers, but any application estate. And then we saw Microsoft get into a lot of trouble with these new NPU devices because they had recall on them, which wasn't total recall. It was a way of just taking screenshots of everything you're doing. Now, if you look at your engine, that's perfect, right? Because instead of you going using the scraper to pick all the web pages up, this is already picking it up, but it's desktop apps, right? So people are on their, let's say it's mainframe system or anything else, and it's already starting to build a catalog of all the interactions, recording all the, you know, the data that's been injected into it. So suddenly it opens it up to your platforms to automate the future, right?
Okay, I'll interrupt you now because this is getting brilliant and awesome flow, but this should be part of But going back to the hobbies, I ask about the hobbies. I could see that you are excited about the new technologies in general. This might be one of the hobby, even these VRs and everything. And I noticed not only today, but I think we met in person last time in Madrid.
Madrid, yep.
And I notice it now again that you are probably big fan of Microsoft as well, because you notice it so many times. So let's see, we can discuss it later, but now let's move on to the hot seat questions, and I would ask Juraj to drive it.
Then because we like finished the topics with VR, I would like to ask you that if MetaQuest or HoloLens?
Definitely HoloLens, right? HoloLens was an epic
Okay,
piece of kit.
okay. I need to stop you because it's only one.
One answer,
Yeah.
HoloLens.
Okay. Good. What is your favorite food?
Pan-Asian fusion.
Okay. I forgot that. You completely destroyed me. I was expecting everything, but not this. Right. Okay. But maybe most stupid testing idea. What you saw like in 2024 or heard or listened or?
Well, it would have been a conversation between me, Jason, and Tariq, creating a new company called Only Testers, like OnlyFans, but for
Oh,
testers.
that's good.
So, that was the most stupid idea I think we had.
You had a couple of beers already, no?
We had, yeah.
Okay. And maybe the opposite side, the most clever or most maybe interesting idea what you heard last year.
Well, I'd have to promote you guys for that. I think seeing you guys in, going and doing the Web Summit, which is a brave move, right? In front of all those startups, trying to push the technology and then obviously opening sourcing the Playwright tool. That was a bold move to kind of really show where technology is today and where we should all be at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Good.
I will explain you later what's the tool because you probably don't know.
Microsoft or Apple?
Definitely Microsoft.
I expect that.
These have to be part of the bonus video as well. Okay. OpenAI or Anthropic?
Anthropic, definitely.
Okay. When AI replace testers?
Never.
Ah. Really? Okay. Okay. What is your favorite country?
I would have to say at the moment New Zealand because that's where I'm from.
Okay. And I have the final one. What is, from your perspective, most valuable KPI for testing?
I would say code coverage.
You can
No, I need to remove this part because I'm still trying to say my boss that no, not to use code coverage and all this. Oh, come on.
Just give them diff blue and then just say, there you go. There's your code coverage sorted out.
No.
I didn't hear about them for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, they only support Java, so they've obviously got a bit of a limit. And obviously, last year that kind of got blown out by so many other companies that could do similar technology. But it's interesting because whenever I ask people about what's your code coverage look like, and everyone's using SolarCube, everyone's doing something like that, you typically find that the numbers are scary low, like super scary low. And you would think it's not quite outside of testing, but as a way to, as a an entry into at least code smells and just understanding the quality of what's coming through. It is depressing how low code coverage metrics are in 2024, 25, right?
I have maybe very strict opinion on this code coverage or any coverage type of discussions. I think that the number is not so important than the discussion about it. Because if you understand what that means and how much you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it and so on, you can cover whatever, business processes, menu options, code, anything. But I think the importance of that discussion is the discussion itself rather than measuring some specific number.
And that's why, and I love, obviously Tariq, has got the advantage of having, not in test.io, they've got Report Portal, right? And, Report Portal's a great open source platform. Dimitri, who runs it, super smart guy, and, we had this conversation the back end of last year with Tariq going, well, what is important from a metrics perspective? At what level do you report on? And again, back to your tool, you had like features coming out of Gherkin, and you could actually understand. Well, am I doing it at a feature level? Have I got tests that are running? Playwright scripts that I'm running at the feature level, or am I pulling this all the way back to a requirement, right? And I think, part of it is that discussion of, well, what is the coverage representing? I did a code coverage for testers workshop in Star West 10 years ago, and I was like, no one's going to turn up to this because it's the most boring topic in the entire world. And it was full. And we won best workshop for that year, which there must have not been any other good ones for that year. But it was interesting because people just wanted to start asking the questions, because before they were too afraid to kind of go in and say, put the lift the hood and go, well, what's going on here? And what developers are like. We're all partially developers. The testing part is the bit which we kind of struggle with, and talking the same language, and even starting using tools that help communicate coverage in whatever metric you want to look at is interesting. But again, I think it's scary because you look at it, and that's why when you said about when's manual testing going to be replaced, it's still 80% is done manually, and you sat there going 80%, and that's from Diego from Forrester. That's 22% average, and that plays across functional and non-functional testing. And you sat there going, really? Are we still at that number? 3 decades on? And I think there's this disconnect between teams that are agile, SDLC, SDEDs, who are technical using modern stacks and how they do things versus traditional, maybe aerospace and defense, financial healthcare systems that haven't really moved on. And I think they're the ones that need help and, are still really in pain. And I think this is where we get into this. People like James and Michael, who are very advocates for, testing over checking and also maybe AI in its infancy, people relying too much on it without kind of having a structured approach to look at it and go, is what's being generated valuable, right? And I think, there's a lot to be learned there, but I think AI augmented this concept of human/tester in the loop. I think when we're talking about large language models and agentic AI and all that kind of stuff, we're going to see that for the foreseeable future. However, yes, there's innovations that are happening, like you guys, like testers.io from Jason, who are taking the heavy lifting and maybe generating 70% of the assets that you need, and that you can get away with 25% still being done. Maybe things like the European Accessibility Act, where you sat there going, well, how do I test the haptics coming out of the back of this physical device? Well, I'm not going to automate that because it's not software. There's no interface. I'm just going to do it with a human, right? So I think part of it is there's this blend. And I know Jason come up with this crazy quote where he's saying that actually there's still going to be the same amount of manual testing required in the future, but exponential amount of AI first solutions like the one you've built, which are doing so much of their heavy lifting to keep up at the pace of the people doing auto code gen and developing faster, that testing always has to keep up with the pace of dev, right?
Yeah, this reminds me one of the talk I saw from Uber. They are migrating from Java to Kotlin using AI. They start manually, and then they apply AI to migrate. And it looks like completely different story, but this is similar to migrating manual testing to automation. And they said if we would do it, because I distinguish these days between manual automation, so you need to really write the code and maintain that, or automatic automation, which is basically AI-driven testing. And we are still talking for 30 years, we are talking about the automation, but it's still so manual. We are doing so many things there manually, only the execution is automatic. So this transition into that more AI-driven approach will speed up a lot of stuff. And what I could hear from you is that in order to keep and maintain an amount of manual testing, we need to automate because the testing demand will grow. So to reduce to keep the manual testing in certain level, we need to quickly grow with that automation to cover the blowing up development with a lot of code. That's something what I'm taking out from what you are saying, and it's pretty interesting. But let me restart this discussion again, because we finished hot seat, and again it transitioned into nice flow, and now I will do a third chapter. This will be about the topic we agreed that we will discuss, and it's future of software testing, AI in software testing, and we will probably end up with some current trends, or maybe sometimes maybe even buzzwords or overhyped topics. And then I would like to discuss at the end what will be after that, if you have any idea. So let's start with that. I will just quickly repeat from your intro that you are there for 25 years, but we didn't discuss yet. When did you first time touch anything AI related in that career? How it happened, or what was that? How it worked or didn't work? Maybe tell us a bit story about that, and then from there we can start moving right on that time axis.
Yeah, so I think, it was probably about 15 years ago when I started testing what they call testing of AI infused systems, right? And I think, you could play that back to anything, a Monte Carlo algorithm, anything which has not got the exact same input because there's some kind of ML involved. And it was for a company that was working with Amazon for doing the classification of subcategories for products, right? So, I've got a TIE fighter behind me. Where do I stick that? Well, probably in toys and games, but I also might put it in collectibles, right? So part of it is you're using things like modern things like YOLO, which can use identify items that are in an image, but then traditional computer vision, and then using TensorFlow or any kind of traditional ML kind of approach to go, okay, well, we're trying to find products which have TIE fighters in them, right? As an example. And so testing of AI infused systems was straight away to me felt like, well, actually the practices and principles we used to test before in test automation couldn't just be reapplied, right? And this kind of got me excited about two things. One was about 2 years ago, we did a free book, which you can, link in here, which is testing of artificial intelligence systems, right? And this was done part of the ISO 29119 part 11, which is testing of artificial intelligence systems. So there was an ISO group which has been around for probably about 10 years now, working on how do we test this. And so I kind of came up with this gated.ai approach, which was goal was the first letter, and it was like accuracy. You've got misclarifications of the TIE fighter depending on different angles and stuff like that. Do we need to do more training? Is it okay? Or are we overtraining because it's really great at recognizing X wings, but it's not very good at recognizing Y wings, right? Whatever a Y wing is, right? So part of it is, training of algorithms, testing of algorithms seemed really exciting, and it seemed like an opportunity where it was like, okay. And then it kind of started getting dark, right? Started getting the whole bias landscape, the ethical AI aspect, and it started getting to that point of the training data sets that you were using. Did that have bias in it? Where were you getting those from? You weren't just pulling them from, from Amazon's historical transactions and real life, products. It started getting into that landscape where it started getting quite complex, right? It got the whole process started becoming overcomplicated. You saw that kind of, I guess, that merge of data scientists, right? Which were these academics, which were phenomenal at developing these algorithms, but not very good at answering the business question, which was what are we trying to build? And how accurate does it really need to be, right? How much does it just throw off to give somebody else, all right, this has been misclarified, let's have a look at it and give it to a human. And you saw things, that like Amazon Turk, where it started augmenting some of that. And it was quite smart and quite exciting, but it made me realize that there was this requirement, and there still is a requirement for testing of AI infused systems and
Mhm.
identifying data drift over time, how the algorithms are performing. And there was a lot of stuff that really needed to be explored. And I guess we started seeing people talking about testing of AI systems, and then they went off, and maybe this explosion where suddenly the last 2 years, or maybe you could say even 3 years, suddenly everyone's got this association of AI being this subset of NLP, being NLU, natural process understanding, which is now these GPTs, general pre-trained transformers that seem to be really good at writing code, and taking inputs and generating something that's believable. That actually now everyone suddenly got really excited and talking about testing, but really they're biased towards these co-pilot type systems because they're really excited that ChatGPT's on and the use cases that could bring. And it's maybe taken away some of the focus from what the classic ML AI, which is still a big part of most organizations. There's still, risk profiles in banks and stuff, all built with these classic ML landscapes. But now everyone's excited about large language models.
Yeah, maybe this reminds me one of the question I'm, how to say it, often asking in these discussions. Whether do you think after this LLM blows up, and basically now everyone is AI expert by just calling REST API, and you don't need to do anything else, just understand how the HTTP works, and then you could do some AI engineering. Do you think that machine learning could come back in certain or similar flavor, that people will use it so simply and easily as it is now with LLM, or you think that LLM will eat up entire AI world? Because a lot of stuff you can do which was pretty efficient with machine learning, but now you can cover that with LLM, even it's a bit different approach, but you can still get the same result. So what's your opinion about that topic?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because, in a way, it's, if you think about large action models, which I think is one of the things we'll probably end up talking about, large action models really have merged two kind of capabilities together, right? And it was originally, it was not called large action models, it's called large agentic models. That's what originally they did. So they were trying to build the agentic architecture behind the model. And the model was just one part, right? It's just one small component of what is in essence a generative AI platform. And that's the thing, is that, the ingestion, all of the other bits are as important as just this one tiny component, which happens to be the GPT. And I always joke with our solution is only not many GPTs have been hurt in the process because they don't actually do that much, right? The rest of it is classic ML kind of capabilities, right? Just powered by some capabilities of multiple multimodal models, right? So, part of it is I think people have got too excited about GPT, and that's kind of what I'm trying to partially calm down a little bit with things like the European AI Act and stuff, just trying to make people realize that maybe not giving everything over to ChatGPT is the way forwards. And, maybe you need to think about bringing some of these models offline and then start using the architecture, things like RAG architecture, retrieval augmented generation, knowledge graphs, so graph RAG architecture, starting to evolve the way that they manage the process, right? I know, unfortunately, they're calling it ML ops, which is annoyingly kind of put on top of it, but it's like ML flow, just sat across some kind of visibility of how are these things transforming over time, not just hitting a REST API and expecting what comes back to be good. And, thinking of chain of thought, thinking about prompt tuning, think about all of the other stuff that goes with it. And I make the joke, which is the Star Wars joke, is it's like, Luke and his X-Wing going and blowing up the Death Star, and they go, "Nice shot, kid. That's one in 7 billion." That's exactly like it is with most prompts, right? Is people are firing off these one-shot prompts, and then obviously these people like Tariq and Jason is going, it's a chat GPT, right? It's the conversation is all about chain of thought of taking one input to the next input and then asking it what prompt should I have written, and then passing that and then comparing the two. You know, there's a what I call shadow prompting, which is when people just go off and use ChatGPT, the result looks good enough, so they use it. Whereas really, you should be, the good, prompters, or people like yourself who've built battle-hardened, proven-out chains that actually create something and make sure Gherkin has a given when then syntax, and it's not just garbage in, garbage out, to stop the conversations going the other way, which is what we've seen with people like, Michael Bolton, is they've said AI is bad, but actually they're not. They're saying AI is good. You just need to put some of this rigor around it. And I think this is where we need to move. And I think to your answer is, will ML come back into the conversation? Will AI in its truest form come back into it? I think it will when you start seeing these agent endpoints that are classic computer vision, like YOLO, and aren't just stuck on the front of a large vision model, which takes YOLO or some other kind of vision model and then passes the values in XML to a large language model to say, well, what is it? Oh, it's a picture of a cat. Who cares? Part of it is, I think we've gone past, what Tariq used to do for test.ai and train 1 million icons of the shopping cart with TensorFlow so that it could always click on the identifier. That's kind of gone. We don't need that anymore. We can do that with these tools. We just need to know that not all of it's magic and not all of it's a large language model.
Okay, you are pulling it to the right direction. I really like it, but I feel like this might be too heavy, jumping into to that deep water. So maybe let's start with that LLM. There was machine learning, then there was LLM, then we all know this ChatGPT, and I think after this era we might start losing some people. So what is the next one? And I would like to stop here and maybe elaborate around that. You was talking about some embeddings, and you was talking about the tools, but you didn't call it tools, which are now combined. These days, this is the new prompting is not only about shooting the prompt, but we have at least these two other components which are interacting together. So could we call this already agent, or where this agentic definition starts? And I'm asking because I don't believe there is a right answer to this question, but how you see this?
Yeah, I think this is the thing, is I think agentic is an overstep, right? And it's definitely a marketing. It's been driven out of a lot of hype from Gartner and Forrester, kind of saying, Diego going with Turing bots, which was about 4 years ago, and then the Gartner guys doing agentic AI about 2.5 years ago. And this year is really exciting because it's the first time they're doing the wave. IDC are doing it, and also Gartner are all doing agentic AI. And the interesting thing is that it's no longer just test automation vendors, robotic process automation, UiPath, and now, Copilot for GitHub in separate waves. They're all in one, right? They're all cross SDLC. So the idea is a dev tool, a test tool, and a project management tool, and even something like Figma for UX could all exist in the same ecosystem. Figma might send a mock-up of the application to your app, which would look at the screenshot and then identify what elements need to be tested to then generate some playwright scripts. The idea with an agent architecture is has an endpoint which can interchange, and they can talk to each other and communicate, whether it be passing an image, passing some description from a requirements tool, or a different direction, right? So I think part of it is that's the architecture. That doesn't really exist more than, Microsoft's UFO and a few open source, frameworks that are trying to allow agentic AI to become mainstream. But I can see the future where, someone like the Microsoft estate, I keep on mentioning to people there's something called Microsoft Graph. And if you turn on Fiddler or something, you'll see Microsoft Graph is sending information all the time to your Azure tenant. And so what's Microsoft Graph? Well, Microsoft Graph is a graph database. It isn't a graphing application. It's a graph database which you can query through very similar GraphQL messages about data it's building about what you're doing. So if you're doing a Teams call, or in our case, we're doing a live stream at the moment, it's taking the transcript and it's passing it to a storage within a traditional RAG architecture, which could either be a vector store and some kind of chunking strategy of storing text with those keywords available within the graph to say, okay, Jonathon on this day had a conversation. This is what they talked about. These are the highlights, and started building out the model, which you could then ask it. I might not ask it questions, but somebody else in my organization might say, does anyone know anything about agentic AI? And you go, well, actually, Jonathon had a conversation last week. And you kind of sat there going, well, why are Microsoft doing this, right? And it's because being able to take that data from Jira, Confluence, SharePoint, Word, PowerPoint, Visio, getting that into meta format that can be consumed in these new architectures to fed into these systems of reference so that it can actually do better RAG-based queries. That's what it's trying to do. And the referenceability saying, well, I know this product should only allow 40 days of, of log retention because it's been stored in Doczilla in the developer landscape, and that's where the source of truth is, because here's the YAML file with the retention value 40 written in it, which is deployed in the build, right? So part of it is it needs to start understanding this data. Now we're a million miles away from that, right? We're even though that's happening today, we're a long way away. But that's where Sam and OpenAI really want us to be, because then they can build actions to build the pipeline, to change the retention date to 60, to update the requirements that's just come in to say, can you change it from 60 to 40 to be GDPR compliant in Norway? Then suddenly it builds the pipeline, releases the app, does everything for you, and you're sat there going, oh my God, it's magic. And you're like, well, no, it's not. It's just lots of agentic AI chain of thoughts going across a number of different systems that have all now sold you the agentic AI vision and charged you 20% extra on your subscription because you've now got the agentic version of it, right? Okay. That's the view of the future. But how does that actually start for me and you, right? Or for the people who are watching this? And it was interesting this week on LinkedIn, one of the guys from Greece posted a blog saying, oh, yeah, Jonathon keeps on telling me about LM Studio, but now I download LM Studio on my machine. I pulled down something like Nemo, which is a 128K context window model, which performs like a 12 billion, but only takes 7 gig. And all these new laptops have NPUs, neural processing units. So they can fit within that 8 gig memory, which makes it a Copilot plus laptop. So when you have a Copilot plus laptop, you can use all the LLM capability offline. Like on the plane, you can sit there and ask it to do basic, queries, and it will just do it all within the NPU landscape, but it's offline. It's a small model. This is the same thing. You can pull a Nemo Minstrel of Experts model down. You can pass it an image. You can pass it text. You can give it, large documents within the 128K space and start feeding it in Jura exports of all your defects and say, where are my duplicate defects, or what are the most risky things that I need to look at? What am I not seeing from the data? What are my JMeter results log files telling me? You can start feeding all that stuff on your traditional laptop using just standard compute, no sexy hardware, and it lowers the barrier of entry because anyone can do it. It's completely free, and you can start building your own, in essence, agents, because you can expose the ports on that as like you would do with OpenAI. It just becomes a port, and build it into your solution. So there's lots of ways people can get started, even if they're step 1 of 50 before this new wave starts happening.
I see. So maybe I'll now pull it a bit into testing again, because this is a general, I would say, IT discussion. And I noticed maybe last year or maybe even year before, you was talking about tester GPT. Am I right? Is this still idea alive? Could you maybe tell us how this is related to the topics we were talking until now?
I'm interesting.
Yeah, so I did actually create a tester GPT platform, right? And it was the idea was to create something that was free, which understood testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say that, you asked earlier, what's my favorite favorite between OpenAI and Anthropic, and obviously for those keen-eyed of you, the Anthropic console has a prompt generator now, which is worth its money in gold for buying some API credits. But what it in essence does is you can pass it something like a bit like what you've got within in the platform. You can pass it something like, oh, I want to pass in an image and I want to generate some requirements. Okay, well, what's the prompt that I should write? And
Mm-hmm.
Jason would always ask it afterwards, what prompt should I have written? For those who aren't amazing at crafting prompts, the prompt generator suddenly changes the entire game, right? Because it allows you to quickly create that input, embedded input, output, the format I want it in, JSON format.
Mm-hmm.
This is how these are rules associated with it. And it also takes Tariq's entire courses, which is written around Markdown, and give it a mission statement telling it the
Mm-hmm.
data types it should be, whether or not it should be, a date of birth should be in there in a certain value, should it generate some sample test data. All of that is taken away from it. So suddenly the idea of doing prompt tuning and prompt engineering disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back to, well, how do we actually allow it to do testing, right? And this is the $1 million question. And call I was on earlier with Antoine from Sogeti, they built this amplifier, which is very similar to what Tester GPT, which we built a couple of years back. And what it does is it uses TMAP, which is a methodology to look at different types
Mm-hmm.
of coverage metrics, right? So if you think about equivalence partitioning or boundary value analysis or any of these techniques, if you ask GPT, how do you do boundary value analysis? It says, well, here's the method, right? Really useful, probably pulls it straight from the ISTB glossary, which is externally facing, right? However, that you could ask it to do some code for equivalence partitioning, right? So create me some code, and then you could take cursor.com, put it into into in essence Visual Studio and Claude 3.5,
Mm-hmm.
and then you could get it to run. So you take in a value and say, okay, I want the some numbers that are going to allow me to do a good spread of different numbers. That will be an API endpoint for me to do some Postman scripts or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one method of 100 methods that the classic ISTQB, TMAP, whatever, risk-based testing approach you've taken.
Mm-hmm.
You want to try all these different types of coverage techniques to get the right set, the perfect set of tests. Now, of course, Jason's nailed this with testers.ai, which is his new venture, which is kind of the next step off Checky. So Checky would give you 4,000 tests, which you could do. And some of them were accessibility tests. Some of them were usability. Some of them were just, basic, can it log in, can it log out, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's taken that a step further and he's gone, okay, well, now I'm adding, in essence, a persona to, well, Janet is a UX designer. What is Janet going to say about Google.search? Well, it doesn't seem that engaging when I go to the page. It's really blank. There's loads of space there. What does Peter, who's the business owner, say? Well, Peter's really annoyed because he wants to advertise on Google, but then he types into Google, how do I advertise on Google? And it brings up 8,000 ads, and he has to go through help, support, thingy to actually get to the point which is the money generating aspect of Google, which is, I want to pay you money and you get me on the list, right? So part of it is it looks at these different personas, but what he's really doing is Jason's spending a disproportionate amount of time taking all of these prompts, taking all these different testing methods, taking all these personas and generating thousands of tests for a website. Great idea, right? But Tester GPT was, how do we, in essence, allow it to understand how to test? So when we ask it something like, can you do all pairs testing, or you do a particular methodology around model-based testing, it doesn't know how to do that. It can give you a response of what it is, but what we've had to give it is the ability to say, okay, I'm going to give you an input in a certain format, and I will expect you to do the actual work behind it, not just give me a response of how I actually do it. And I think part of that is we've had to build those different methods that allow it to do the different things like positive, negative testing, all the kind of the boring stuff that you don't really want to do.
And this was done like simple chat window, or were there any other integrations, or?
Yeah, it was quite a big undertaking, shall we say, because actually, to your point earlier on, where you said, well, actually, you're talking about the fact that the test execution part is just this tiny piece, right?
Yeah.
And what we got quickly annihilated. So it was about 3 years ago. I was stood up on Gartner's stage, and I said, look, we created a code generation tool, right? Which was a code generation tool which would allow you to create sense talk scripts, right? And so the sense talk script in essence said, because sense talk doesn't use any object identifiers because it's image based testing, we thought we're on to the win here. We've got the ability to create natural language out of the back of a transformer and run it. And we did. We went on stage, we showed it out, and then nobody was interested. Everyone was like, well, code generation is not interesting, right? I can create some Selenium scripts. And we were like, okay, well, it's more than that. It's taking, in essence, natural language and it's generating code. And they were like, no, we're not interested, because it's, in essence, like you already said, someone's already gone through and done the hard bit, which is the test design. No. All we're doing is just creating, and our code was so simple, like, click, sign in. It's like, this is 30-year-old automation, right? So what we realized is that actually test design in automation, once you've got the test design from, a requirement to a test, is only about 20% of the overall piece of work. And of course, as test automation vendors, we spent years and years talking to you about self-healing, maintenance, all this stuff, which was, again, the rework of that 20% every time it breaks because we don't have the right XPath and all that other nonsense. But we're still focusing on the scripting, the automation activities, right? The actual hard work is someone's gone through and already created the right test. Which test should I create? So we focused on the test design effort, very similar to what you kind of done, which was, let's understand and interpret requirements. And this was the key problem, is everyone went, well, we don't have any requirements. And we went, well, you've got thousands of user stories. User stories, spoiler alert, are requirements in essence, right? Oh, you've got stuff written in documents, you've got stuff on Confluence, you've got all sorts of sources of information. So you need to feed those systems in. So what we were doing is, in essence, ingesting, which is the hardest part, right? Because at the start, we ingested these large SRS documents, software requirement specifications docs, and it had 8,000, a NASA document would have 8,000 requirements in it. And we'd say, create me 80,000 tests. Oh, well, A, that takes a long time. And B, if you upload a document, and a classic document, into either now, in the old days when people talked about hallucinations, and you asked it how many requirements are in that document, it'd have no idea. It just makes something up, and you could argue with it, and it'd never really get the right number. So the ingest process was the hardest part. So we hired a whole stack of ex-Apple engineers, and we got them to, in essence, be able to understand and interpret data formats to put them into a format that could be represented in a graph. So in essence, every document became a graph, and the graphs were, in essence, 4 different graphs. A document graph, a testing graph, so a graph knowing and understanding the relationship of testing. So if you think of something like, I've got a criticality score, but I've customized it on my Jura instance, and I now have 5 levels, severe, down to low. It understands the terminology of testing of severity and impact and all those kind of basic terms. So that way, when it looks at, in essence, Jura export of a JQL, which says 5, it understands 5 equals high, and it's a custom field or something. So it's got some data normalization of the understanding of testing, the document itself, but then also the bit which I was wrong about is the industry piece. So what was the big trend by the end of last year was domain-specific large language models, which were fine-tuned variants that know derivatives within financial services really well, right? So you'd have these smaller 1.6 billion models, which were really fine-tuned for a domain. Now, what you can take from that is you can actually say, well, actually, you should create your own domain model, a graph model, which is understanding financial services, automotive, autonomous vehicle, radar, driving level 6. It understands the domain. It understands the testing context of why do I test the braking system on this autonomous level 6 in the wet. It needs to know all those 3 answers, and also the definition of wet, icy, very icy, or Dubai hot, or Hollywood hot at the moment, and also rain, right? Part of it is all these weird combinations that a large language model would never have thought of unless it has the data from these models. And then finally is the customer model, because the customer will have terminology which overlaps with equivalence partitioning. They might have EP is electric point for where they plug in the electric points for the car. So there's suddenly a dictionary conflict between 3 models or 4 models. And this is the thing, is that the complex part of these next generation models is the understanding of your customer industry testing implementation. That's where and it's been the same problem we've had forever, but without pulling all that data in, it can't become a subject matter expert. So that's what we built, is those 4 dimensions that then could understand either a test or a requirement, and then actually do the test design activity to say, there's 6 levels. And we did this for a automotive customer. We said, actually, there's 6 different types of definition for weather. And they realized that actually all of their braking specifications were wrong, because they either had wet or dry. They didn't have any level between them. And actually now they have to, replace the brakes on some of the McLarens and some of the other cars, because they're not designed for tolerances of extreme weather patterns.
So these are the embeddings to LLMs, right? So
which is an agent kind of component, right? It's one of those components where an agent knows testing, or it knows kung fu, or it knows dev patterns, or something else.
Because for me, my understanding of agent is still that it's, instead of just chatting, it's more about taking some action. That's one of the parameter, and it could probably independently act based on some requirements and everything. So if we are talking about testing and AI agent and all these things, it keeps advancing. So once this will be mature or done, what's the next after that? What will happen next?
Yeah, so this is where agentic appears, right? So I think you're completely right with that description, right? Agentic is in essence an endpoint which can talk to another agentic endpoint. It's not Clippy, right? It's not you have a talk to an agent which is in the corner. This is agent to agent. This is AI to AI with its own skew of knowing financial services, knowing automotive, knowing marketing, knowing UX design principles, right? These are going to be very small, fine-tuned models that work within an agentic framework, right? But what's next, right? Well, there's 2 things. Obviously, where we got all a bit too excited about was the large action models, or the large agentic models, which is where there's an actual action that happens at the end of it. Now, this is really interesting. If you've seen XLAM, which is the Salesforce variant, or if you've seen UFO, which is the Microsoft open source version, what you're typically starting with is you're starting with a state, right? And I know James Whittaker talked about this 15 years ago, but in essence, what it's doing is it's assessing where you are. So I always do the same demo for whenever I'm doing it at the workshops, and I say to it, okay, ask it to play. What's your favorite track, Marcel? What's your favorite band?
Oh, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Red Hot Chili Peppers and Californication or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So part of it is I don't know what your laptop is, right? Your laptop could be, let's say it's an Apple device, right?
Mhm.
So it'll look on the taskbar and it'll go, okay, he's currently on a call, but I see at the bottom he's got Spotify. Now, it might not see Spotify and it might just see, because, you're cool, you might have Opera there running as your favorite browser, right? So part of it is it's like, okay, well, I don't see Spotify, I don't see Apple, I don't see, media player, whatever else. I'm gonna spin up a browser. Okay, it's come up, it's got your homepage on there. Okay, well, we need to go to YouTube. Yeah, all right, the rest is easy. But every time it opens the state up, so that let's say it opens the state up and you've got no internet connectivity, it's gonna go, okay, well, maybe he's got the Red Hot Chili Peppers on an MP3 in his local search thing. So it launches Finder and then types in red space hot. It could pick up anything off your desktop, right? I'm hoping that that's only MP3s, because otherwise it would be playing all sorts of stuff. But double clicks on it and starts launching it that way. So even if it's in an offline state, it's trying to do what is called visualization of thought, which is assess what the page is doing. So what that is an equivalent of YOLO, where it's looking at everything you've got on the screen, and then it's going, you're on an Android, you're on Ubuntu, you're on, what Kali variant of Linux, right? And it's looking at your state, opening up the next step, and then deciding what the next step it should take. So if you think of the old traditional automation where it's quite linear, we're kind of expecting a number of steps, and maybe you've got some logic in there, whatever. This isn't doing that. It's generating the code at runtime. So it's looking at the objective. The objective is play Red Hot Chili Peppers. That's what it's going after. If the end goal is that it has to order a Red Hot Chili Peppers CD, get you and an MP3 player, it will do that, because it's finished its goal. But the rest isn't, and it's called neurosymbolic programming, right? It's an abstraction level coding where you're giving it commands, business terms, or activities that you want it to do, actions, and it figures out how to do it. And then, of course, it does generate the script, right? Once it's gone through the path, it might hit Playwright, it might hit Cypress, it might hit whatever, right? But typically, it's evaluating its next step based on what it sees at the current state. And that's going to be interesting to see how large action models and visualization of thought, how much of that is going to be successful. And of course, this is why Sam is doing it at the moment. It's all about identifying people who are easy to replace, which I know sounds awful, and then process mining what they do, which is why if you look at things like Copilot Studio, they'll detect that you send out every Friday a report to your boss, and then realize that actually it can do a power pivot. It can get the data that you need in the right format, and actually can replace that middle manager who doesn't send any emails, doesn't talk to anybody on Teams, in the transcript, doesn't move any actions across in Jura, doesn't actually have any velocity stuck behind them. Actually, they're the weakest link. Goodbye. And I think this is where people like us, the geeks of the world, who are super productive, always doing lots of different things, they'll look at it and go, we can't replace those guys because they're crazy, right? But the people who are doing boring, mundane, basic decisions where it's model decision making, so the model is really easy to replicate that. They're only doing 6 things, so you can only go 6 ways, and then there's another 6 things you can do after. Those people will be targeted for the AI workforce replacement program, right?
But based on this
landscape.
But based on this, what you are saying, that I have maybe 2 final questions in my mind. That where you are, like, what is inspiring you? Where you are like looking for these new ideas? Because today we are discussing, about all the new topics. That how maybe to say something that I'm not saying that those topics were not tangible, but you can imagine that maybe our followers are a little bit, oh, come on, what they are discussing, LLMs, RAC, and okay, agentics, that where the people can maybe to inspire, where they can maybe what they can learn or what to look at, and maybe what are the first steps from your point of view that the testers or the IT people can start with the AI? What are the first steps of what they have to do to stay relevant maybe in 21st century?
I think it's an impossible question, but I would say podcasts
And
like yourself are the best place to go, right? Is you're going to get different people, like you got Jason on. I get a lot of what I talk about because Jason will ping me 2 or 3 times a day sometimes, and he'll be like, "Oh, have you seen this?" And then I'll go off and read a paper that he's discovered that someone's just published. I'll have a response back to him, and then we'll geek out a little bit and go backwards and forwards. But your series, and the people that you have will be a great source of learning. Now, of course, we've now said XLAM, all these are the things which people would have to go off and have a look at. And then they might go, oh, well, I can go to the Git repository for XLAM, I can download it, but oh my gosh, where am I going to get started? Because this says it can do any web page, and does that mean I don't need to learn Selenium, or I don't need to do Playwright anymore? Am I going to lose my job? Part of it is this panic and unease of where is the industry going? But we all know, because we're still sat from the intros, 25 years, actually incrementally wise, there's always going to be the people who are the early adopters, but the early mainstream and the late mainstream is that you've got 10 years before any of this is going to be just you're the last one to the party. Now the question, and this is really where we got to at the start, was like, what are the AI skills that I need to educate myself? And this is this AI literacy capability where he keeps on talking about knowledge graphs and all this kind of stuff. How do I get all my spreadsheets and stuff into a format that it can ingest, and then I can start asking it questions? What are the basic stuff that I should learn so that I can take my use case, which might be all I'm doing is pushing Excel spreadsheets around everywhere? How do I know how to get it into CSV, use the Anthropic prompt generator to say, I'm passing you in with these headers. The third header is defect severity. Severity is 1 to 5. I'm going to have to explain that. How do I get to the point where I can start using it in my day-to-day activities and feel like I'm literate of enough to take advantage of it? Because otherwise you will be left behind. And this is the quote that keeps on getting put out. Yep.
So how I understood that what you said is that following some social media, there is a lot of people, interesting people, maybe following specific people to learn from, maybe watching some discussions, and you at the end you said, okay, there are some certain specific knowledge you probably need to keep up with all this new stuff. So could you maybe mention, like, listing out very quickly, like 5 bullet points saying this, and that? What would be your top 3 or top 5?
This is what you need in 1 month.
This is what you need to do for a thing. So Audible, great location to listen to stuff, as a source. Obviously Udemy is a great location for training. I say to people, use Kaggle, which starts with a K, which is the Google classic ML platform, which gives you all the tools and the tutorials that you need to get started with the bits and bobs like Jupyter notebooks and stuff that you might not be completely familiar with. And using these Google Collab environments, and literally getting started for free, right, is partly what we're trying to say to people. Learn the fundamentals, and that fundamental might be just paying for a ChatGPT account and using that, right? It doesn't have to be a huge jump, but also following people like Jason Arbon, who obviously posts a lot on there, and Tariq King, who obviously posts a lot around the AI space. Great starters to follow those people who are posting stuff about what's happening in the industry and how that's affecting people. conferences are a great source. Now, of course, the last 2 years in conferences, everything's been about generative AI,
Yeah.
right?
That's true.
And it's all singing the good, this is going to change the world. You also have to balance in the Michael Boltons and the people who are saying, no, this isn't going to solve all our problems. And that's good, right? You've got to have balancing views. It can't all be, everything's going to be great, because it isn't, right? And like you said, you aren't going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by other people using AI and taking advantage of these tools that you've heard today. And you're like, are you telling me all I need to do is pay $7 to Anthropic and I can do all my prompts that I'm ever going to need to do and be better than everybody else in my organization? Okay, well, I'm putting it on my credit card now. Are you telling me that, I should just read a couple of books that have come out and actually, download Jonathan's free AI book, which I'm going to give you the link for, and that tells me everything I need to do? Brilliant, I'll do that, right? Part of it is, I think people just need to get started and they don't need to worry too much about where it's going. And this was kind of the back end of the AI panel discussion at Start West, was things are going to change really quickly. So, as much as I'd love to say to people, learn prompt engineering, I don't think you need to. I think in a year's time, you're going to have tools like your tool, which is going to be sat there looking at, scraping your web page, generating you some tests. And all you need to know is, well, what do I do with the output? Be able to look at it and have that AI supervision where I'm looking over the top of it going, are these tests all the tests I need, or am I going to need to add some more into the gherkin for it to generate some more tests and then rerun it? They just need to know enough to be able to have enough oversight to see that the tools that can give them value are giving them value, and not doing the press the button, let it do it, and have no idea what it's doing, and then just running it and going, well, I've run 15 tests, because it doesn't matter how many tests you run. Why don't you run 1,000 tests? Why don't you only run 70 tests? That's not the question we're trying to answer. It's just the understanding of where the value is, why I should be using your tool. And that's the question they need to ask you as well. It's like, if I use your tool, what can it do? How much do I need to do myself? What prompts, what extra stuff do I need to cover? What's the limitations of the tool? And then also understand, when you release a new version, which does more European Accessibility Act tests in it, how do I take advantage of that? And that might be the new version that comes out.
Yeah, that would be another discussion. This would be another
discussion.
Our 1 hour session. So I would stop here maybe with that last question about where to inspire and learn. That was awesome. I'm overwhelmed, I would say, with so many ideas and so many topics. Then I'll need to somehow absorb all these and maybe go through that 2, 3, 5 more times. Because I heard a lot of new tools as well, but I wasn't able even keep up and stepping in and asking some more details. So thank you very much.
AI to summarize this, with the bullet points, the main tools, and we will try it tomorrow.
So thank you very much. It was awesome discussion.
It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
It's great. I was really looking forward to this session anyway, because part of, like I said, the tool which you've been building, right, it's opening up that barrier and it's making it available for people, right? And I think this is the thing, is it's not been real for the last 2-3 years, because people have just been overhyping the industry and getting too excited in front of themselves. I just think now, it's part of clearly communicating it to people and say, look, you can use this technology now. Go off and use it and have some fun, right? And see the benefits of it, because, I think a lot of people are scared still. They're still very much, I don't understand it. This session is not going to have helped them anything.
I will need to probably send you some nice T-shirt, because you are promoting.
Yeah.
I'll wear it on stage and some of my other
tool instead of myself. So that's a nice position to be in. So maybe some monkeys on the T-shirt will.
Yeah. Well, if it's a static image, you can just send it across to me, or send me some posters. I'll add them into my my backdrop.
Okay.
But it's exciting. It was good to catch up, and I'm going to be speaking at Expo QA in Madrid again, and I'm also running a workshop on that on agentic AI on that March date, I think it is.
Yeah, we are meeting also in Rotterdam in March, and Expo QA is in May. I should be there as well,
May.
but it's conflicting
so-
with Munich. I don't know whether you are there in Software Quality Days in Munich.
Software Quality Days, no, but I am Test Automation Days. They've just sent
Yeah.
out the agenda for that, so I'm on that list. So we'll try and do some VT. Like I said, I just bought a new camera today,
Okay.
so we should try and do some promo stuff for
Some
you guys.
dancing.
Yeah, we are looking forward for the results.
I'd like to see.
So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. There's, as always, big fan. So yeah, so anything I can do, just let me know.
Great, thank you. Ciao.
All right, see you later.